Hello patrons, welcome to another video post. I've been back from my trip to Dublin for the World Science Fiction Convention and the UK for research and collaboration and just exploring around, spending some time with Richard III. About a week now. I'm very nearly over the jet lag, so I thought it might be fun to do a little bit of a sort of unboxing. I've actually already opened the boxes, but while I was traveling, because I only travel light, whenever I bought a book, I posted them all home so I wouldn't have to try and get them in the luggage. The theory is I'm meant to not buy many books. You know, I have Kindles for that, but theory and practice are nothing to do with each other. So I have a big box of books to my left here, and I'm just going to go through them all and reveal to you what my current stash is. And you know, I'll eventually just add those to my current treasure trove of books, and eventually I'll read them all, I guess. Fingers crossed. That's the idea. The first one I'm going to show you is a little book called Muck and Magic. Here we are, by Michael Morpurgo. The reason I picked this book up is that one of the things that I was doing while I was in the UK, so I was spending time with Janet Anderton, who is an artist. She's the artist for a new book that's just come out from Improbable Press called A Question of Time, which she's done with Jamie Ashbird, who's the writer. Anyway, so she and I have got a couple of projects we're working on, and here this book was, I picked this up because it was had the feel of the kind of book that that we want to be doing together. So there's a bit of research left to do, but it's a nice, beautifully illustrated book. But as we go, there's little images on each page. Going through the background has got a bit of colour, but there's pictures that go through each through the stories that's being told, as well as splash pages. So it has kind of the size, the feel that I'm looking for. So there will be more about that project as it hopefully comes together, and we'll have more to say. But that was basically a book to demonstrate to Janet and to look at myself about what I want to achieve, or what we want to achieve when we get that book together. Another book that I picked up while we were in Leicester. Janet lives just outside of Leicester. The Leicester Museums were holding an exhibition of Ladybird books. People may have seen the more recent ones about the Ladybird Guide to Hipsters and things like that. And it's actually still done by the original company that did the original Ladybird books. So while I was there, in order to help support the museum, I picked up this one, The Story of Music, a Ladybird book. Theoretically, it will help with future Kitty and Cadaver stories that I may write, but it's also just super cute. The Leicester Museum also had an exhibition of a royal portrait of Richard III and a few other things, so it's there to see my boy. Speaking of Richard III, at a second-hand bookstore up around in Loughborough, I've picked up this one, A Guide to the Battle of Bosworth. I have done a post fairly recently about some of the research I've done with Richard III. Many of you know that Dickens my boy, and I do hope one day to write a book, maybe about an alternative timeline, but in order to write that book I need to understand the timeline that exists a little bit better. So this will be part of that research that I'm doing on Richard. At that same second-hand bookshop, just because I enjoy a bit of historical crime fiction, I've picked up this one, The Wanton Angel, an Elizabethan mystery by Edward Marston. I haven't heard of these ones before. This is number 10 in the series, but I thought it sounded fun. So yeah, in due course, hopefully I'll read that and let you know if it was any good. A little thing, this isn't a book, but a fun thing I picked up in the British Library was this book of Wild London. One of the reasons I picked that up was that it had a map already to a church ground that I went to visit. It was a church that was bombed during World War II, and has now, the ruins are still there, obviously been shored up, and it's a garden. But there's an online, I cannot remember the name of the original poster, but somebody had worked out that that was probably the church being referenced in Good Omens in the 1940s sequence with Aziraphale and Crowley. So I look forward to finding out more about Wild London, and then I'll work out how to put it in a book sometime. While I was at the World Science Fiction Convention, the Dublin Libraries, which are pretty fab, and Dublin's a city of literature, they were handing out a free book, a free kids book, and you know, how can you resist a book called Bumfizzle, the best on planet Earth? So Bumfizzle will be taking up my time a bit later. But another thing I selected from their table is that they had these literary guides to Dublin, so little Q&As, Romping Through Dracula, which is, you know, Bram Stoker being Irish, and Romping Through Dorian Gray. So they're all kind of fun, more like little exercises, and again, you're just looking at ideas that might come up there. One of the big things I picked up was this absolutely gorgeous volume, this beautiful hardcover, which has managed to survive the trip in the post coming home. It's called Bending to Earth, Strange Stories by Irish Women. The publishing company is the Swan River Press, and every book they had on their table, which they produced, was just gorgeous, just beautiful production values, just very handsome looking books, and so I was just delighted to pick this up as both as a some science fiction, or, you know, strange stories, speculative fiction by Irish women writers, which is fantastic, but just to support a small press which was obviously just doing amazing work. So I'm looking forward to that. That was their little postcard they sent as well. So they had a range of titles, and everything they do is in these gorgeous hardcovers with the dust jackets on them. Are just so beautiful. That was actually all that I picked up at the convention per se, but I also went to the National Leprechaun Museum in Dublin, which sounds slightly cheesy, but it's actually a kind of museum performance space about Irish folklore. So in fact, the first room has displays of various representation of leprechauns, which is every bit as cheesy as you'd expect, but then a storyteller guides you through, and they're not exhibitions so much as just room spaces that are set dressed to symbolize or embody different elements of the Irish storytelling traditions. And so this, you know, guy Stephen on our day led us through from room to room and told us Irish folk tales as we went. So it was a beautiful way of keeping those Irish folk tales alive, delivered in that, you know, performative way that you in performance, which is where that whole gift of the gab and the whole storytelling element comes in. It was just fabulous. I really, really recommend it. And there's a magnificent bookstore at the end of the tour, and I spent a long time in there chatting just very intelligently with the staff there, who are very well read, and yeah, they were fabulous. I really enjoyed my time with them. And so I picked up, first of all, a book of Irish superstitions. So that's just, again, it's always good to pick up little bits of pieces about folklore and how that works. Again, Kitty and Cadaver, but you never know what else I might be picking up. I do have other book ideas which are just simmering there in the background. I do a lot of reading, waiting for ideas to coalesce, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But there's Irish superstitions and Dublin folk tales. So that will be some more, I guess, modern, not quite so deep in folklore per se, but, you know, more recent ideas, including like who the real Molly Malone was, and somebody called Bang Bang Dudley, who roamed the streets of Dublin shooting anyone who caught his eye. That sounds fun. So more specifically, folklore about Dublin, which sounds cool and fun. Dublin's a fantastic city. It's very lively, and I love all the statues, and the people are really nice, and Trinity College is gorgeous. The Book of Kells was amazing. The Long Library also. So yeah, I could happily have just stayed there for months on end, but alas, home and work call. But you know, I like ghost stories. So again, hanging around Leicester. I went to Nottingham for the day, actually. Janet took me along there, and Nottingham show ghost stories because I like to find out some things overlap between counties and things, but some stories are unique to the place as well. So just part of my folklore collection, which I've got quite a lot of, and in fact I've run out of space to store, but never mind. My very last day in London, so, I was in Dublin, then I was in Leicestershire and, hanging around Leicester and Nottingham and Loughborough, staying with Janet. So I spent my last 3 days in London, mostly at the British Library, doing research on Richard III and on a true crime book idea that I have. So collecting up information on that. But my very last day, I had enough time. I'd finished all my research, and so I went off to the Wellcome Museum, which has all sorts of amazing exhibitions about the human body and the human mind. They're, like I said, very intelligently put together and very lively. And this particular exhibition was called Smoke and Mirrors: The Psychology of Magic, and had a lot in it that I didn't realise, which was that, it starts off talking about seances and spiritualism, and also photographs of how some of those tricks were done. Dear old Arthur Conan Doyle shows up, quite determined to say that he's personally experienced spiritualism and things like that. So we won't mention the fairies that tricked him. But what was curious about this exhibition, and why it was part of the Wellcome, was that the whole study of looking into spiritualism and then debunking spiritualism developed into this whole idea of parapsychology, and then folds up into neuroscience. Why do people see what they want to see? Why do some things why do magic tricks work in the way that they do? So there was a lot that got uncovered in those early days of looking at spiritualism and how that worked on human memory and human perception, and how unreliable they are, which feeds into things like witness statements as well when you're doing crime stories. But it was just really interesting how the human mind works, and how it achieves a kind of persistence of vision in its memory to think it's seen things that it has not seen. So as part of that, obviously I picked up the whole the Spectacle of Illusion book, which has got all sorts of information about the exhibition itself, including Harry Houdini, who was great at magic and was an absolute debunker of spiritualism. So he and Arthur Conan Doyle had been great friends and fell out notoriously over that. In fact, one of the magicians who has photographs in the display has apparently got a little bit of trouble from the Magic Society about giving away tricks, though I have to say, from seeing the stuff on display, he doesn't actually explain the tricks, he just explains the psychology behind them. But then he does the trick. You've just got to work it all out yourself from there. Part of doing that then is the Sleights of the Mind, the actual talking about the neuroscience of magic, and what that reveals about how the human brain works. So again, who knows where that might come in handy, but again, I have a particular book, may become a series of books, but I've got something in mind that I've been doing reading for. This is now part of that reading, as well as Servants of the Supernatural, which is a study of the Victorian era pseudoscience of mesmerism and seances and the spiritualism that happened at that time. So mediums and psychics and all that sort of stuff. So that again is part of my reading. Of course, it'll be a while before I get to any of these planned books. That's why the reading's so good, just to help steep my brain in what the possibilities are before I start coming together with the actual plots that might be occurring and characters and things like that. But first of all, I have to finish writing the Talbot and Burns book collection, the Talbot and Burns Mysteries, which I'm nearly finished. Then I've got the third Gary and Lissa vampire novel set in Melbourne, the Vampires of Melbourne series. So that's got the working title of Beyond Redemption. I have an anthology project which hasn't yet been announced that I am already working on. And I probably have half a dozen more ideas. I've got to do those ones that I've currently got on my plate and then I'll settle down and prioritize what's left and see what else is coming. So yeah, for a woman who went on holidays saying, on a working holiday, saying, well, that's it, I'm not going to buy any books while I'm gone because I've only got a rucksack to travel with and there's no room there. You know, I've come back with quite a lot of books. Oh well. I say that like it's a bad thing. Thanks for listening and enjoy yourself, and let me know what you've picked up in your travels. Bye.